It's always a pleasure for us to engage with you and an honor to collaborate with the community of West and Islam Dialogue of the World Economic Forum. We're here today to discuss a topic of increasing significance, Islam and American politics. This year, of course, the presidential race has captured national, even international attention on our news every evening, on the internet every minute. New issues arise and new aspects of the campaigns are dissected with vigor and insight. In terms of West Islam dialogue and West Islam understanding, this presents a wonderful opportunity. We have the chance to ask questions about the role that Islamic issues and concerns will play in our country's politics and in informing our national agenda. Some of the questions will be contentious, and they will cause us to confront some of the darker sides of our national character. When candidates talk about Islam and terrorism in the same breath, what impact does this have on our national opinion about Islam? What damage can this do to the state of interfaith relations? There are sensitive questions to confront, but they are also extremely important, and they get to the heart, to the underlying source of some of the major tensions that exist between the American Muslim minority and American society at large. Other questions, however, can help us discover our common ground, our shared values, our shared desires, our shared perspectives. How important is West Islam interaction to us? How committed are we to improving this interaction? These questions can enhance our capacity for both intercultural and interreligious understanding and lay the foundation for peaceful coexistence. This is why an ongoing West Islam dialogue is so important. We do live at a time when the lack of understanding between Western and Islamic cultures has led to misconceptions, distrust, and inexcusable acts of intolerance, even violence. Aside from being an affront to our very humanity, this poses a great threat to our global stability. I cannot stress this enough, that the only way to achieve a more peaceful and tolerant world is through a greater understanding of both our differences and our commonalities. At Georgetown, we have recognized the necessity and importance of improving dialogue and interactions, of building bridges of understanding between faiths and cultures. We're the oldest Catholic and Jesuit university in the United States. In 1968, we were the first Catholic university to hire a full-time rabbi. Nearly a decade ago, the first American university to hire a full-time Muslim chaplain. More recently, the dean of our college, Jane McAuliffe, served as the editor of the new 6-volume International Encyclopedia of the Quran. In 1993, we deepened our commitment to Muslim-Christian understanding by recruiting as our founding director, Professor John Esposito, to direct what we now today call the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding. Just 4 years ago, we launched a new project led by Tom Banshoff, which has enabled us to create the Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. These two centers are complemented by a new program that we've launched in the last 4 years called our Program for Jewish Civilization. We also launched a doctoral program in religious pluralism and theology. And most recently, we joined with the Washington Post and Newsweek Interactive in their collaborative online effort on faith. This need to build bridges is also why we've been involved with the World Economic Forum's Council of 100 Leaders groundbreaking report, the first Islam in the West annual report on the state of dialogue, a collaboration between Georgetown and the World Economic Forum. We're very excited that this helps provide some of the context for our conversation today. I'd like to note just a few of the report's major findings, just to underscore the importance and urgency of our quest for dialogue and understanding. By clear margins, majorities in Muslim-majority countries think that Muslims respect the West, but that the West disrespects them. 3/4 of the respondents in the United States think that the Muslim world is not committed to improving relations with the West. A significant majority of Americans view greater interaction between Muslim and Western worlds as a benefit, while a majority of respondents in countries like Denmark, Sweden, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Spain view it as a threat. Hopefully, this report and its systematic overview of Muslim-West relations in their political, social, economic, and cultural dimensions, and by forcing us to confront our own preconceived ideas, that we'll be able to address in a deeper way the questions that confront us and help us to build bridges between communities and countries and to advance and promote interfaith and interreligious dialogue. Today's roundtable gives the opportunity to examine Islam and American politics within this larger context, this shared goal. And on behalf of Georgetown, I'd like to express how delighted we are to be involved in this endeavor and how deeply we are invested in its success. It's now my pleasure to give the floor to Sherif El-Diwany, the Director of Middle East and North Africa for the C100. He certainly has extensive experience in the area, and I'm confident that his expertise will enrich today's discussion and help us to address questions about Islam and American politics. Thank you everyone for being here today, for your participation and your engagement. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. El-Diwany.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I'd like to second Professor DeGioia's remarks on the report as success. It was great success, the report for 2007, 2008, that we have decided together in the past few weeks that we will continue the effort for next year. And following our meeting this morning, we will begin discussions for next year's report. And we look forward to a wonderful extended collaboration both with Georgetown and with Gallup and others who have participated in this great achievement for last year. I would like also to thank our host, Capitol Hill, the people who organized this for us. It's wonderful, and my colleagues, Alistair and Saman and Nava, where are you? Yeah, we put this together with Tom. It's great. Before I just share my comments, I'd like to tell you a story about yesterday in the airport in JFK. I had time. I think this is not going to be continuously. I don't think we'll see this for long because competition now with the open sky policy probably will push the airlines to be on time. But I had 4 hours in the airport. I went to the bookstore to look at the shelves. And I was quite amazed because I lived here 5 years, long time ago. I was amazed at the difference in contrast and how many books were on the shelves of this bookstore on faith, on religion. Anything from Deepak Chopra's Third Jesus to God is a Salesman to Jim's book and many things. And one which actually stays with me, and I wanted to ask Professor DeGioia what you're going to do about this one, is called Jesus Went to Harvard. So I hope that we do something about Jesus coming to Georgetown. We are our partners and we're willing to help with that.
We've just hired him actually for next year.
So Jesus came to Harvard and next year we'll welcome him here in Georgetown. I also had in preparing for today's work, I had the chance to read many articles about the book Who Speaks for Islam, which was authored by two people with us here this morning, Professor Esposito and Dalia Mugahed from Gallup. And in reading that, one recent article about it points out or presents a very interesting view. And it says, and I'm not quoting, and please forgive me if I'm not accurate in referring to your study, but I am paraphrased what I read, is that when it comes to U.S. Muslims, the grievances are mostly about U.S. foreign policy and not about religious matters or freedom of religion or freedom of practice of the religion. Is that a correct assessment of what I remember the latest article on that? But what does this mean? It means that in the U.S., Muslims are brought together around or on a position that they share with regards to a public policy issue, which basically puts faith, in that case Islam, squarely in the public space where issues and matters of state are being debated. This is a very important findings I discovered from the articles I read about the book. I'm sure the book says many other things, but this is something that stays with me, and I thought it's significant that this discussion today explore this particular aspect of it. We are also reminded in the news coverage of the U.S. elections that faith is very, very influential in shaping of public opinion and the opinion of American voters. Hence, again, the question of today is very relevant. When it comes to U.S. foreign policy, we immediately think about Iraq, of course, Israeli-Palestinian peace process, about Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and they seem to be also taking a significant part of the attention of the administration here. In the preparation, currently, we're doing preparation for our Middle East meeting in May, the World Economic Forum meeting on the Middle East in May in Egypt. We're struggling with the agenda of policy or geopolitics in the region, and something came up, which I think I'll share with you today, because it probably will allow us to, with some honest retrospect, to do what Professor DeGioia pointed out, is to ask different questions and get into the contentious issues of things. It seems from the discussions we've had in Geneva that at the bottom of all relationship between the West and Islam, and particularly in the U.S. situation, given the politics being in the forefront of the discussion, the relationship particularly with Iran and with Saudi Arabia are really quite important. They set a lot of everything that emerges out of foreign policy in the region is really set in relation, whether in partnership or in rivalry against the other. And I would really hope that if we can today, Sally, if you allow us, steer us a little bit, to dedicate some time and to do some discussion about what are the 3 or 2 most important salient positions on the relationship of the U.S. with these 2 important countries. And without understanding, how Americans feel about these 2 countries, everything, public opinion is shaped by this relationship. And I am inviting you today to try to dedicate some time to that. I again repeat Professor DeGioia's request to be honest, brave and quite sharp with the questions, and not to shy away from contentious questions. And I thank very much. We are in very good hands today with Sally. Thank her very much for her collaboration on that. And I wish us all a good morning. Sally?
Okay, thank you very much. What a distinguished panel, and I hope we can all leave here unbloodied by the end of the day. There was an article this week about how, for the first time, Islam has overtaken Catholicism as the largest religion in the world. And clearly, Islam is an issue that we all... One of the things that I have learned as co-moderator of On Faith in my almost year and a half of doing this is how little people know about religion, how little people know about their own religion, not to mention how they know virtually nothing about anyone else's religion. And it seems to me that one of the things we've been trying to do and have been able to do to a certain extent with On Faith is to enlighten people. And we have always found that one of the exciting things is we'll have panelists from either atheists or evangelicals or right-wing or left-wing or Muslim or Catholic or Jews who will come to us and say, I was really hostile or contemptuous of that person or that religion until I started listening to them and listening to being part of this dialogue, and now I understand. So clearly, this kind of dialogue is really important, not just for the United States and our own political world and our own political life, but in foreign policy as well. Religion touches everything. And without religious understanding, you just can't. There's just no way to have there's no way to have a peaceful world unless people can really understand each other's religions and then begin to sympathize. We're going to start with our first question, and I'm going to let John Esposito, Jim Wallis, and Awad Nihad discuss this to begin with. The first question is, how is Islam emerging in the 2008 U.S. presidential campaign, and what will be its likely impact? John, do you want to start?
Yeah. I have much less to say on this than for other questions, but my reasons will, I think, be clear. I think that in general, the Democrats have ignored the really hot-button issues. I mean, obviously they deal with Iraq, but they don't deal with other issues. They don't necessarily cultivate, as it were, a political constituency in the way that you might think that they would, given the number and size of Muslims, and particularly since Muslims are now economically and politically integrated into our society. So I think the Democrats would prefer to stay away from it because, they see it as a potential explosive issue, especially in an environment which the major Republican candidates have all emphasized the threat of extremism and terrorism. And I think that part of what is going to be in the background in terms of advice that Democrats will get is don't go near that issue because then it looks like you're soft on extremism and soft on terrorism. And of course that would then be reinforced by, as Tom Bancroft referred to it, the approach to Obama. Which exists not only among the screaming talk hosts, but some very responsible people. I had a major, an author for a major publication write to me and say, I know this is an esoteric question, but I just wondered, in Judaism, you're a Jew if you're born to a Jewish mother. Now, one of my friends tells me that you're a Muslim if you're born to a Muslim father. This was an esoteric question, had no relationship to, obviously, to Barack Obama, etc. And it moved along, the number of issues. It got into issues of security. When you get to the Republicans, as I said, all of the major Republicans have or decided to use the extremism issue as a kind of major sort of front. Giuliani certainly put it front and center. And if you look at the advisors that Giuliani had, they are, in fact, people who are Islamophobes. This isn't a matter of calling names. It's a matter of looking at the way they talk about Islam in the Muslim world, whether it's Podorowitz or it's Daniel Pipes, etc. The former governor of Massachusetts, before he even ran for office, when he came to Washington to give a talk, which the media had said at the time was his way of showing that he had national aspirations, one of the statements that he made had to do with the tapping of the phones of mosques, let alone then statements that came out. And I think what's troubling now, if you look at the Republican side, is that Mr. McCain, it's not his political side of his issues, but some of the statements that he's now making go beyond making the distinction that President Bush has called for consistently, distinguishing between Islam and Islamic radicalism. And I think it especially comes to the fore when, on the one hand, the notion was a year or two ago, he denounced what I call the militant sort of Christian right, not the Christian right, but the militant sort of wing, and yet then started to cozy up to some of the leaders, and more recently winds up with a sort of spiritual advisor who, in fact, not only in what he says, but in his publications, talks about the fact that there is a war, and there should be a war fought against Islam. In a context in which 57% of Americans, when asked, what do you admire about Islam, said nothing or I don't know. And that number has gotten worse in the last few years, and moving to 57%. This is explosive.
Jim?
Well, just to build on that, the Obama Muslim roots is something that we should talk about for sure. That's become a big issue. In the confrontation between the West and Islam, it is radical rhetoric that makes the headlines again and again. And I often deal with the religious right. I was on CNN with them last night again. And I want to suggest that to some religious right leaders, this has become issue number 3, and right behind abortion and gay marriage. And it's moving up. The issue they call Islamofascism. So Tony Perkins and I had this thing last night on CNN, which it came up marginally. It comes up a lot, and I think this religious right agenda that now includes this is a critical part of this campaign as we move forward. Sherif, you did encourage us to be bold and honest and provocative. So since Tom quoted John McCain, and saying the transcendent challenge we face is Islamic extremism. The transcendent challenges we face in the world, I would suggest, are global inequality, global cultural and political conflict, and global warming. And religious extremism is a complicated consequence related to those other three challenges. But if the complicated consequence is lifted to the level of the transcendent threat, you will exacerbate the threat, escalate the threat, and ignore the other conflicts, which is to say, John McCain is fundamentally wrong. And I want to just say that at the root of this, for me, is a misconception, which is people often feel that fundamentalism is a result of taking religion too seriously. I would suggest that that fundamentalism is a result of not taking faith seriously enough. It is an accommodation to theocracy, to violence, and to power, and it leaves out the religious commitments of compassion and social justice and pluralism and peacemaking and democracy. So there will be a conversation in this election campaign, as there always is, about how the answer to religious extremism, or some would say bad religion, is secularism. I would suggest the answer to bad religion, so-called, is better religion. And the conflict in particular is between religious fundamentalism in all of our traditions. Remember, in my Christian tradition, we have Martin King, who we celebrate this week, and also the KKK, all appeal to the same book for their inspiration. And so the answer to the fundamentalist streams in our traditions are the prophetic streams in all of our traditions, which leads to a political strategy, which is a closer alliance, an active, strategic, closer alliance between moderate and prophetic forces within our own traditions in alliance with one another in offering an alternative to extremism and to the political rhetoric which will be at the center of this campaign that will be appealing to that kind of extremism. So I think there really is a role for religion in this campaign to counter the notion religiously that Islamic extremism is a transcendent threat in this global context.
Is Nihad here? Oh, there you are. You were hiding behind me. Go ahead.
Thank you and good morning. I would like to thank the World Economic Forum and Georgetown for allowing this opportunity to talk freely about some sensitive and serious issues. The elections are exciting times for citizens in the United States, but also it's really a time of suspense and anxiety in the world. I just came from a visit to the Middle East and Turkey, and I was struck by the fact that so many people in the region follow every little news about the US elections, and they know the details that sometimes I miss myself. They capture every statement by everyone, and they're anticipating major and positive change by this elections. However, I'm really disheartened to see the lack of consideration, understanding, and depth of thought and vision when it comes to the critical issue between the United States and the Muslim world. I see that in a cheap way, candidates are throwing balls at each other using Islam. The Republicans are using Islam as a hammer against the Democrats. Democrats are not impressing me by the fact that they do not have the courage to say, let's not play politics with religion. Unfortunately, because of the Muslim community's new arrival to the political scene, it doesn't have the muscle to push back. And therefore, the terms Islamofascism, radical Islamic terrorism, Islamic extremism, all combined together in one sound bite without any distinguishing between mainstream Islam and the acts of the few. I just feel that we are a shallow nation when it comes to some deep strategic relations and understanding of the history of Islam. A history of thousands of years is shrunk to a sound bite and political maneuvering, and we're putting on the line so many lives, American lives and non-American lives. So I'm disheartened by the fact that there is lack of understanding, lack of research, and they just appeal to people's ignorance and racist approach to important issues in American society. However, on a positive note, you will be surprised that American Muslims are very excited about this election, and they're just coming and they will be voting in record numbers this year. Despite that Islam is being used as sledgehammer from one candidate against the other to push Barack to distance himself from Islam. He's not Muslim, but why does he have to almost condemn Islam by the force that he's distancing himself from it? It's disheartening to us, but yet we see that he's bringing change, for example, that on the bigger scheme of things, that he will bring not only a new political face, but he will bring maybe new policies. So the Muslim voters are interested in change, despite that Islam is being used as a political tool. However, and I will conclude with this, Ralph Nader is important in this factor. Many young Muslim voters may not vote for what's convenient, but they may vote for what's right. And they may vote for Ralph Nader because he's talking about injustices that the candidates are not willing to address. And therefore, the Muslim voters, as swing vote, they can cost some people to lose or some people to win. So the Muslim political voting power, it's an important power that should be reckoned with, and it's really bringing new impact on the U.S. election.
I would like to ask a few questions of the whole panel here. John mentioned McCain and the man he calls his spiritual guide, Ron Parsley, who basically said America was founded in part with the intention of seeing this false religion, i.e. Islam, destroyed. And I believe September 11th, 2001 was a generational call to arms that we can no longer ignore. That was a one-day story. I mean, most people, if you mention it, don't even remember that happened. McCain also said early on, several months ago, when asked if he could vote for a Muslim president, he said, I would have a difficulty voting for a Muslim for president. The other day, Hillary Clinton was asked if Barack Obama was a Muslim, and she said, not that I know of. Now, can you imagine if she had been asked if a Jewish candidate or George Bush or anybody, right, any of the other, or John McCain were Muslim, she would not have said, not that I know of. I mean, that was a signal. So it's clearly a factor here. And there are two questions that I'm interested in from you all. One is, if you were, what it's done is it's forced Obama to continually talk about how he's a Christian. I mean, he keeps bringing it up. He sent out an Easter card with his family, Happy Easter, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian. If you were Obama, how would you deal with this? I mean, clearly he doesn't have any problem with Islam, but he does have to realize that, as you said, John, how many people, when they said, what do you admire about Islam, said nothing, and think the first thing that you say when you think of Islam is terrorism. How would you handle this if you were Obama? And secondly, do you think that if Obama were elected President of the United States, that he would change, that his election would change the Americans' view of Islam and the world's view of Islam? Anybody take it away? John, do you want to? Let's see.
To give you a sense of the context in which this is occurring, I've never said this in a public situation. I've been in the field for a long time, and I've always operated as a scholar of Islam. But as Islamophobia has grown, I have found myself stating publicly in talks often, talking about my background. In other words, going out of my way to say that I was with the Capuchin Franciscans for 10 years, that I did my first degree in Catholic theology. And part of that has to do with the highly politicized situation, so that the fallout of any association with Islam even gets into when you're a scholar, depending on what you're saying. I think if Obama is elected, I think it will send, first of all, an incredible signal to the international community, because I think he is viewed as an international personality for a lot of reasons, personally as well as his vision. I think it will be celebrated in the Muslim world. But you see, if that were quoted out of context, people would say, well, there we've got it. You know, Esposito knows the Muslim world, and he's saying it's going to be celebrated among those people. I think that I understand politically why he has not been as forthcoming as I think he should be. But I think it's a losing situation if he doesn't. You know, I mean, I think that
if he does not
step up, just as he had to step up and talk about not just his Christian background, but his minister and some of the statements of his minister. And that gave him an occasion, I think, to provide a kind of inspiring, you know, vision, and set out a kind of view. I think he has to do it on this other issue in terms of just the underlying ethnic and religious issues, and in terms of what America is about as a multicultural and multi-religious society. Not to do that, I think just, you know, contributes to the situation that we have. And it goes against the very reason why many people want to vote for him, because they see him as somebody who not only provides a vision, but somebody who's not afraid to speak out. And he makes that point about himself. And not to do it for this significant a number of members in our community, I think is a real issue. I think we underestimate just how a lot of people like to think that the negative part of our society are just yahoos. You know, it's like years ago when I was being driven someplace, and a taxi driver spent 40 minutes telling me how the Pope was the Antichrist. He did a terrific exegesis of the Bible. It was very creative, so I was fascinated. But, you know, I wouldn't I might draw a conclusion that this person just wasn't too bright when it came to Christianity, etc., or wasn't too sophisticated. But I've been in situations, I gave a talk last week, great response, but somebody got up who's a vice president of a company and who's gets out as a public figure, clearly came prepared, little statements, and stated apodictically that all of the Arabs and Muslims in Dearborn back away from any criticism of terrorism. Then got up and said all Arabs and Muslims are raised to hate all Jews. Okay? I mean, just put it out, and that these kinds of statements exist and are put out there in more sophisticated sort of venues. So when we talk about the danger of ignorance about Islam or growing Islamophobia, for an American public that doesn't know much, and for most Americans, like everybody in this room, often we're too busy to barely stay on top of our lives. So then what are we hit by? Media images and sound bites. And just as the terrorists, I woke up to Al-Zawahiri's speech this morning, okay, just as the extremists get the mic, so do the Pat Robertsons, the Parsleys, your mainstream religious leaders, the majority of them don't get the coverage.
Jim, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I spent the last couple weeks defending Barack Obama in the media around the Jeremiah Wright stuff and other things, and I know Jeremiah Wright as well, and he needs some defense in this conversation too. But I think John is right. I think Barack Obama would change the image of this country around the world more than anyone else we can imagine right now. An African American, a black face in the White House, somebody who's lived in a Muslim country, and I think I'm not endorsing anyone. I'm friends with all of them, but I do think he handled the Jeremiah Wright thing quite well. It prompted a very positive speech on race, I think the best one in decades. which otherwise wouldn't have been prompted except for this. And even on this question, I think maybe if Barack could take this a bit further and do an equivalent, if you will, of the speech on race in terms of, I am a Christian, but this is my stance toward Muslims. Keith Ellison's coming today, I'm told. I want to share an experience with Keith in this place. Last spring, we had our usual mobilization on poverty, Sojourners and Call to Renewal, and we had 500 Christian activists who work on poverty in the room. And Keith came and spoke to us. Members of Congress were coming one after the other, and Keith was the last one. And I started by saying, well, we're introducing today a new member of Congress. He's just arrived. Keith was the kind of activist that would have been in the room with the other activists before he came to the Congress. So he knew a lot of them from Minnesota. And I said, now, Congressman Ellison, some Christians have been concerned about you and taking the oath of office on the Quran and the first Muslim in Congress. And I know that's been a bit painful for you, but I want to tell you, here are 500 Christian activists who are really happy that you are here. And they got up and gave him a standing ovation. And it was just a little thing, but it was a moment of Christians saying, we're Christians, but affirming this new Muslim member of Congress as it's good news that Keith Ellison is here. And John Lewis came in and spoke right after Keith Ellison. It was a wonderful older, younger generation time of an advocate for justice. And I could tell in him there was a real moving sense of he just got a standing ovation from 500 Christians. So I don't think we need to in any way blur our own identities. I think we should say who we are, but then say the Christian response to Islam is being severely distorted by members of the Christian community. And we should challenge them. I want to challenge evangelicals as an evangelical. They are falsely portraying. So there's a statement recently by a number of evangelicals in the New York Times, and a number of us assigned it. Evangelicals challenging the evangelical distortions on our response to a genuine threat of religious extremism in all our traditions, but how do you respond to that threat? Not by labeling the entire tradition with a threat. So I think we need to not blur our own commitments, but then say what we think about our relationship to members of other faith traditions very clearly and publicly.
Ari, would you like to answer the question?
Thanks. I saw that Professor Bukhari also had his hand up, so maybe we'll be able to get to him. It's nice to see you again. I agree certainly with what you've said, Jim, that the answer to bad religion is good religion. And if we don't want religion to be part of the world's problems, we need to include it when we're building solutions. And so I would say that I'm actually quite glad that religion has come into the public discussion and has not been ignored, because if religion is ignored, then those people who subscribe to one religious tradition strongly are going to say, well, this discussion doesn't concern me because it hasn't addressed my issues. So I'm very glad that religion is out there. The question is, now we have an opportunity, and how do we guide it? And we love sound bites. As John said, we can hardly run our own lives, so we really don't have a lot of time for nuance. But I would say that it's an opportunity to encourage nuance, to encourage understanding, to encourage the variety that's out there, not only within the Muslim American communities, but within all the religious communities in America. And I think that there's a great opportunity. I would welcome a speech on religion like the speech on race.
You think that would be a good idea for Obama to do a speech on religion?
I think for every candidate, certainly. Yeah.
Barack, full name is Barack Hussain Obama. And in Urdu language, in Pakistan, it could very easily be translated in Barkat Hussain Obama. And my name is Zahid Hussain Bukhari. So at least we are middle name brothers. So. But I think I will just like to make one very small point, that he has been talking a lot of things on like politics of fear, about Iraq war, about civil liberties here. He also talked about having a Muslim leaders summit after becoming the president. All those things are good, I think. Just two things maybe he can consider, his campaign can consider about that. The first question about just asserting again and again that I am Christian, maybe so what is wrong with being a Muslim? Any Muslim, they have the right here. And Muslims can wait. We will discuss more about that, that Muslims are not in a hurry. Means we have, after 200 years, there is an opportunity for a woman, for a black person to become a president. Still, we don't have any Jewish president. So Muslims are not in a hurry. So they can wait for they are in the line. So it's not a big issue. But the second thing on civil liberties also, yes, inviting Muslim leaders summit, but why not about having a discussion with American Muslims and Arab leaders on all those issues? They are the best scholars and expert on all issues available here. And they are not being partnered. So I think that is another kind of small advice we can say, that on the civil liberties issue, he can come up very openly, that I like to discuss with all those issues with these leaders.
I'm told Congressman Ellison is here.
Right there.
Oh, there you are. You snuck in. I didn't even see you. Well, we are having a very spirited discussion about how Islam is emerging in the 2008 presidential campaign and what will be its likely impact. You know the three questions that we are talking about today, and I thought you might want to just weigh in yourself before we continue the conversation.
Well, certainly, thank you, Sally, and let me thank all of the panelists here. This is truly a distinguished collection of thinkers on this important question, and I'm honored to be here with you, and just want to thank everybody who's here today listening as well. Very vital, important conversation. I believe that pluralism is under threat in our country. I think that pluralism is one of the bedrock strengths of America. I like to say that while the founding fathers got race all wrong and got gender all wrong, they got religion right. And when you look at the United States Constitution, it mentions religion in basically two places, both of which state that the government is a place where all religions are welcome. In the Establishment Clause, in the First Amendment, and then in Article 6, where it says that there shall be no religious test for holding elective office in the United States. And I think that this affirmation of pluralism, religious pluralism, is a result of those framers looking at Europe, looking at other parts of the world, seeing how fights over religion were so devastating to civil society, and saying that, you know what, here you can be whatever religion you choose. There are some great, Thomas Jefferson not only was the owner and possessor of a Quran, but sharp one's got that one. But also, actually was the author of a bill in the Virginia State Legislature affirming religious tolerance. But also Benjamin Franklin made some important statements about religious tolerance, religious freedom, donated money to synagogue construction, and made comments to the effect that, look, if the Mufti of Jerusalem were to want to come here and talk about what he wanted to talk about, that we welcome that so that we can learn whatever might be available to us. So so the people who sort of are presently arguing that there's only one way to be authentically American and only one religion to be authentically American are truly the radicals introducing a new idea. The conservative, small c, idea, the historic traditional idea is that of pluralism. And I think it is under threat. I could tell you that here in Congress, that I, as the first person of the Muslim faith elected, my colleagues have treated me exceedingly well. I've gotten along very well in Congress, haven't had many problems at all. But there have been certain notable exceptions to that general rule. And I will say that there have been some statements that have been made that I think don't reflect the tolerance of our country, but they've been overwhelmingly in the minority. I think it would be a mistake to highlight some of those statements because they don't really reflect the experience that I've had personally here. But I also think that it is important to just not gloss over those comments, because I think that they do reflect a certain latent intolerance. Recently I had a colleague who said that when you look at the religious workers visa, that 1/3 of the visas have been found in a sample to have been fraudulent. And he made the outrageous comment that 80% come out of the mosque. Well, I said, well, prove that. Because I said, if that's true, I'm not scared of that fact. Let's deal with it, But I said, but let's determine whether it's true first. And he just really had no basis for saying it. And there have been other comments like that. And I had another colleague say that there's too many mosques in America and we should put spies in all of them. And I mean, I'm just not trying to pick nits, but I just think that it is important for people to know that while there's been an overwhelmingly positive experience, we have had a few remarkable comments in the course of our time here. And I think it's important to point out that they do reflect a latent level of intolerance that, if not addressed, could in a time of fear and anxiety sort of overflow. Because that's how these things work, People can bump along okay, and then crisis enters the situation, and then scapegoats emerge. So it's important to always address this issue, even the latent hostility. I think it's important not to make vitriolic, provocative statements about those provocative statements. I think it's important to try to foster an environment of tolerance and inclusion. Let people say things, even if they're ignorant, because how else are we going to know, how people are really feeling? So let me just wrap it up here by saying that I think that, there is an increasing awareness among Muslim Americans that civic engagement is very important. And the Muslim community in the United States is made up 2/3 new Americans, 1/3 people who were born here. Both groups have been, I think, historically sort of politically disengaged, because immigrants tend to be that way. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but if you look at immigrant political participation in American society, usually folks come here, get education, get businesses going, then enter politics. That's the general rule. I don't think the Muslim community is going to be afforded that luxury. I think that folks need to get involved right away. And but I think that it's gonna lend to some overall positive developments. I can tell you that there's this budding clinic movement in the Muslim community that is including all faiths. As a matter of fact, Ummah Clinic in Los Angeles has a medical director who's Christian, and has people who are involved of different faiths. And given the large number of Pakistani doctors, hey, I think the Muslim community has a contribution to make in terms of dealing with our healthcare crisis, has important things to contribute in terms of immigration reform, has important comments to make in terms of civil and human rights, particularly as it relates to watch lists on airlines and growing general tolerance as well. But I've gone on too long, Ms. Quinn, so I'm going to stop right here and just thank you for giving me a moment.
Okay, I understand that Congressman Carson is here. Where are you? Congressman Carson is the second Muslim in Congress. See what happens? They're taking over. Congressman Carson, is there something you'd like to add to this conversation?
Just to add on to my colleague Keith's point, I think this is a great opportunity to discuss the wonderful
Front and center.
Just to add on to what my dear friend and colleague Keith mentioned earlier, I think this forum is a great opportunity to see Brother Jim Wallis here, big fan. But this is a great opportunity. Americans should not be afraid of Muslims. We are part of Muslims. When we were fortunate enough to win, I made this statement. In Indiana, we're called Hoosiers. And I made the statement, I said, you know what? I'm an Indy 500 Hoosier. I'm a Covered Bridge Festival Hoosier. I'm an Indiana Black Expo Hoosier, and I'm a Muslim Hoosier. I'm a very proud American. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that being an American, a proud American, and being a Muslim conflicts with one another. I think we can be both and one and the same. So I think this is a great forum. I'm not going to take up the time, but I'm appreciative to be here, and keep up the great work. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience for Congressman Ellison? Yes.
I'm André Useem with the Religion News Service. Congressman Ellison, the question earlier was, should Obama make a speech about religion as he made about race? And what's your feeling on that?
Well, you know, I think that everybody needs to talk more about religion, religious tolerance, religious pluralism. I think it's a good time to renew those values. You know, I tell you, things like religion, race, gender, all these sort of issues that historically have both united and divided Americans, we have to continually revisit these issues and update our views on them. It's important that our presidential candidates not just sort of elbow each other to the front, but actually serve as teachers to the country, offering views, provoking thought. Because after the race speech, I think it made everybody kind of reflect on issues of race a little bit and think about the world from a different perspective. So, yeah, I think that I would encourage him to do that. I will say that I don't think it's his particular responsibility to do that. I think that we all have a responsibility, but I think that if you're going to be the president, whether you're Hillary Clinton or John McCain or Barack Obama, you have a responsibility to get out there and signal that religious tolerance, religious pluralism is how we do business in America, but we experience our religious faith in a fairly particular way. We experience it as a Muslim, or maybe even as an African-American Sunni Muslim, or maybe as a white evangelical Christian, or maybe as a Pakistani-American Muslim, or maybe as a Jewish American Muslim of Iranian background. You know what I mean? We experience our religious faith within a particular context. And we should be free to talk about the world through our little window on it. And because that helps the rest of us understand that, yes, we're all different. Yes, we're all the same.